Hi, I'm Colonel Mike Hopkins, and I'm here with Commander Victor Glover, and we would like to welcome you aboard the International Space Station. And today we're going to give you a tour of the International Space Station, but before we do that, we think it's very important that we give you a little bit of a lesson first, and that's a lesson in floating. And floating can be a little bit disorienting when you first get up here. And so we're going to just give you some examples of how you can float around, orientate yourself as we're going through station. So we're going to move back here a little bit to point out a couple of important features about the floating up here. So first of all, you notice these blue, what we call handrails, and that's what we use as we're going around station to propel us around, to change our direction as well. The other thing you notice are feet. Now, we tend to use the top of our feet a lot more up here than the bottom of our feet. So when we're down on Earth, you get these calluses on the bottom of your feet. Well, up here we don't need them. We actually need them on the tops of our feet, because when we come up to these handrails and we're just staying in one position, we use our tops of our feet to hold us under those handrails. So maybe they shouldn't just be called handrails. Maybe they should also be called foot rails. Foot rails as well. The other thing I think is kind of interesting when you see astronauts up here doing PAO events and things of that nature, you notice we tend to bob a lot up and down. It's very hard because you're floating, and floating is fun. And it's what you do when you're in space, is you tend to kind of bob up and down. Yeah. But anyway, so we're going to show you a couple of different techniques of how you get around station. So Victor's going to demonstrate here. And the first technique of floating through he's going to do is when you're kind of just upright, like he is right now. And so now you see he just pushes off with his hands, and there he goes. Now remember, whatever trajectory, whatever direction he went when he pushed off, that's where he's going until he pushes off of something else, another handrail or something of that nature, to change his direction. Now the other, and you're going to see him coming back into the scene here, that's where you're kind of pulling yourself along with your hands. And when you need to go somewhere fast on station, that's often the way that we do it. And I'm going to let Victor Ike give us some tips that he's found when he started floating up here as well.
So I think the first and most important thing to remember, especially when you think you're getting good at floating around the station, is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Something we say in aviation, and is true in spaceflight as well. And the other thing is you need to think where you're going in the long view. So just like when I learned to drive on the freeway, staying in the lane going fast, you had to really aim way down the lane. If you were looking at the lane just to the sides of you, you tend to go a little erratic. And so if you know you want to go all the way across the module, just slowly orient yourself that direction and try to give a little push in that direction. And I found that to be one of the most helpful things. And then you don't have to make as many or as big corrections on the way through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's some good advice. And then the last piece of advice before we get started is, remember, you're in space. You're in a microgravity environment right now, and so there is no up or down. And so every single surface up here is a surface that you can translate on. You can sit there and work in any orientation. And so I think the biggest piece of advice there is that, remember, as an astronaut, when you're in space, whatever orientation you are in, that is up. And so right now, even though my head is down at the deck, as I look down station, I feel like I am right side up. And so just keep that in mind as we go on our tour, because we are going to move around a little bit and change the orientation, but remember, you're always right side up.
I don't know, you look a little sideways to me.
Okay, so as we continue our tour of the International Space Station, we're now going to go from the front end of the space station all the way to the back end of the space station. And so we're starting in the SpaceX Crew Dragon Resilience, and this is actually my crew quarters, and we're going to end up in the Russian service module. And so we take the International Space Station, we divide it up into two segments, or you might consider them two neighborhoods of the same city. And so we have the USOS segment, which is where we are right now, and we're going to end up in the Russian segment, again in the service module. And so we're going to do this in one pass. We're not going to stop at any of the modules along the way. We'll have a chance. We've either already seen that, or later on we'll take some more time in each of the individual modules. But we're just going to see how long it takes us to go from one end of the space station to the other. So if you're ready, here we go.
So we are leaving Crew Dragon Resilience, coming out of PMA 2 into Node 2. And again, this is where our crew quarters are located in the USOS segments. And now we're passing right into Node 1. And again, this is where the kitchen, the dining room is for the USOS segment. And we're currently passing into PMA 1, which takes us into the Russian segment. And this is what we call the FGB. This was the first module that was sent into space. And so we did a little rotation there because you notice these handrails are on the sides and it's a little easier to guide myself through the FGB. So we're leaving the FGB now and we're floating into the Russian service module. And this again is where our Russian colleagues, the Russian cosmonauts, spend a good part of their day. This is where they live, they have their meals, and also where they exercise and do their science. But at the same time, we do get together quite often, and so we are one crew up here. And even though we have two different neighborhoods, we all have the same goals, and it's to do science and to benefit humanity. And so that is one pass from one end of the station to the other.
Okay, as we continue our tour of the International Space Station, we're coming to one of my favorite modules, and that is the airlock. And we're in luck because today Victor actually has a task in the airlock, and so he's going to tell us a little bit about that task and give us a little bit more details on what happens here in our airlock. So I'm going to pass the mic to him, and let's hear from Victor.
Thanks, Mike. So yes, welcome to the airlock. This is where we begin and end every spacewalk, every EVA, extravehicular activity. And it's divided into two main segments. This is the equipment lock, where the suits are stored and where we do all the processing and what we call prep and post, the stuff before an EVA and the stuff after an EVA. And then this portion is the crew lock, and that's where the crew goes in. We close this hatch and we depressurize that so that it's equivalent to outside vacuum, and the crew goes out on the spacewalk from in there. And so right now I am performing an activity to add some water back to the spacesuits. You see I have two spacesuits here right in front and behind me, and we use a little bit of water from each one of them for cooling in the process of a spacewalk, and we just had one a couple of days ago. And getting ready for the spacewalk coming up in a few days, I have to add a little bit of water back to each one, and it has to be very special water, so I've got a special water bag here to add water back to the spacesuits.
Okay, we're now in Node 2. And this is a very important module for us on board the International Space Station, because in the USOS segment, this is where the crew quarters are located. And so we actually have 4 crew quarters. It may be a little hard to tell where they are, but that's actually these 4 bump outs that you can see are the 4 USOS crew quarters. And so we have them on the sides, but we also have them on the ceiling, and we have them on the deck. And so keep in mind, once you get inside your crew quarters, there's no up or down. So again, it's whatever orientation you are in. It all looks normal when you're inside crew quarters. This module, though, is interesting as well because it's kind of like your garage. We also have workbenches in here and a lot of our tools. And so when we're preparing an experiment or repairing some hardware on board, we can take and put it on these workbenches, stabilize it, and then we can get a lot of repair work done. And so now we're going to also, Ike is going to show us a little bit more.
So as Mike mentioned, there's no up or down. Whichever way you're facing is the right direction. So I'm going to do this standing on the overhead. And so he mentioned the work areas here. Node 2 is also really unique because it connects so many important things. So off to my left, or starboard on the space station, we have the Japanese experimentation module, which consists of the Japanese pressurized module and the logistics module, a place to stow items. But this is a module of one of our international partners, the Japanese Space Agency, JAXA, and it's the one we call the cleanest, nicest looking module. And so that is Kibo, the Japanese module, and we also have the European laboratory, Columbus. and that is to my right. And this is the European Space Agency's main facility on the International Space Station. And both of these modules have facilities for running science experiments inside, but also they have the ability to run experiments outside of the space station through pallets and exposed facilities that allow them to do experiments that are either observing space or the Earth, or doing something that's based on the being exposed to the space environment. Another very important use in this module is stowage. You see all of these bags around me. There are also 2 spacesuits sitting right here. No, these aren't our people that maybe did something wrong and we're punishing them. These are just empty spacesuits that we're stowing up here in the overhead. And behind this, when a new spacecraft, the cargo spacecraft, docks, we'll move all this out of the way because there's a hatch here that allows us to get to that spacecraft. And forward, this is Space Station Forward. This is where our spacecraft is, our Crew Dragon Resilience, through what we call a pressurized mating adapter and then an international docking adapter. There is a Dragon Resilience, SpaceX's Crew Dragon, down there, and you can kind of see inside of it now. And it also happens to be, if you're counting, Mike showed you 4 crew quarters earlier, but we have 5 members of the U.S. orbital segment, the U.S. portion of the International Space Station, and so one of us lives in Crew Dragon Resilience, and it's Mike. That's where Mike stays, where he sleeps. That's where his sleeping bag is.
Okay, we're now inside the U.S. laboratory, which is kind of the main module of the U.S. segment. And so in this module, we've got a lot of our life support equipment. We also have hardware like robotics workstations, but we also have exercise equipment, and we have a lot of science equipment in here. And so we're going to go into a little bit more detail right now about some of that hardware that we do have. The first thing I'd like to point out is over here you can see we've got one of our computers, and if you can notice on that computer we've got our timeline. And so this is kind of our daily schedule, and there's a row for each of the astronauts and cosmonauts on board, and this red line indicates the current time. But this is also where we start our day and we end our day on the USOS segment. So we will gather here, and we will actually have what we call a daily planning conference with the ground. And so we'll touch base with all of the different mission controls on the ground just to see how the things went during the day, or how what's coming up for tomorrow. The other piece I'd like to point out in here is the robotic workstation. And so we do have the cannon arm on the outside of station, and we use that a lot for spacewalks, for grappling, visiting supply vehicles, and for also taking images out on station as well. And so this is the robotic workstation. We have 3 different monitors that we can use to see what the arm sees and make sure it stays clear of obstructions and other equipment outside. And then this is how we control it. And so this is our translational control, which allows us to move in and out, left, right, up and down, and then our rotational control. And so we can pitch up and down, roll and yaw the robotic arm through these controls. And now we're going to continue further into the lab, and I am going to pass the mic off to Victor.
And so, as Mike mentioned, in the lab we also have exercise equipment and plenty of science hardware and facilities. And so it's a very busy module. And one of the exercise equipment, pieces of exercise equipment that we have on the station is our cycle. And we call it CVIS. It's an acronym. It's a cycle ergometer with a vibration isolation system. And so this is the ergometer, and you can see a pedal here. And in order to use it, we deploy it. And I'll just partially deploy it so you can see. We use all of the space here on the space station. And so that's the cycle deployed, and there are pedals. We all have our own shoes, our clips that we can use. And because we're in space, we don't need to sit down when we use this bike, so there's no seat. You'll notice there's no seat. There's a back pad and this frame, which is attached to the vibration isolation system, so that while we're pedaling, we're not shaking the space station back and forth. This is what we hold on to while we cycle. And so we hold the handles, we clip into the pedals, and then we get our good workout in. Pretty neat, thinking that you can bike without a seat. We also have lots of different science facilities, and so there are a whole host of them, and I'll just show you 2 here specifically. This is our microscience glove box, and we recently got a new facility called the Life Sciences glove box, which is an expansion of this. Behind this, there's an experiment running right now, so I won't remove the cover, But you see these two holes here. There are covers there that we can remove and put our hands in this box, and there's a glass window here that we can see in and work on inside through gloves on various types of physical or life sciences. And now our primary life sciences work in that environment is done in the gym in the life sciences glove box. But this is a facility that allows us to have power, video, data through the hatch here, through the wall, inside or outside, so that we can get telemetry from the experiments while we run the experiments through the various openings in the box. And another experiment that we have running currently, pretty neat experiment is going on right now actually, where we're looking at how muscle strength changes based on being in microgravity or in 1G like on Earth. And so we have small worms that move through this really neat lattice structure, and we can determine how they're moving based on how they move these pillars. And so we have to look at that under a microscope. And that microscope is here above me. Like Mike said earlier, we use every surface. And so when you operate this microscope, you're actually up on what we call the overhead, and you're using this microscope, and it's connected to this Space Automated Bioproduct Lab, SABLE, we call it for short. And those two facilities are here, and the microscope is connected to it. And so we can use these to culture warm or cool things, and then we have the microscope here that we can put items on the microscope, and then just like Earth-based microscopes, we can adjust the focus and see the subject that we're looking at. So a pretty neat array of facilities and capabilities that we have here in the U.S. laboratory that we affectionately call Destiny. And we could show you a whole bunch of other ones, but we have much more of the space station to show you.
As we continue our tour of the International Space Station, Ike and I are now in Node 1. And Node 1 is our kitchen. And so this is where we have our meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And sometimes our Russian colleagues will come down and join us here for dinner, and it's kind of fun. We have 7 of us around our table over here. But right now it's actually just snack time. We love snack time on board, and so Ike and I are going to have a little bit of a snack, and in that process we're going to kind of show you how we go about having our meals and preparing them as well. So Ike is, what do you got, Ike?
French roast, coffee.
Okay, Ike's going to have some French roast coffee, and so he's going to go over to what we call the PWD, and that's where we get our water. And so right now he's dialed in how much water he needs, and he hits the button, and you can probably see that water bag, that drink bag of coffee is filling up with the warm water. You notice the both the warm or the white and the blue buttons. That's for warm water or for cold water as well. And once it's full, he then gets he now has a bag of coffee. And so it is a little bit different to have your drinks up here, because we can't just have an open cup because then the water would actually go everywhere, and so we have to keep it in these bags like this. And then Ike also is not just going to have coffee, but he's also going to have what? What do we got, Ike?
Got some trail mix.
Okay.
And dried pears.
Dried pears and trail mix. And so Ike's going to get so it comes double packaged up here, a lot of our food, and that's just to protect it and make sure it doesn't get spoiled or anything during the long stays that it might have on station before we actually get to eat it. So now I'm going to pass the mic to Ike, and then I'm going to get my snack ready.
So Mike's got a bag of tea, and he is going to do the same thing, add warm water to it. I believe you could have cold tea if you wanted as well, but he's going to have a warm tea. And you've got a really good snack, or parts of what's going to become a really good snack. So there's some wheat crackers, peanut butter, and then grape jelly.
Grape jelly.
Peanut butter and jelly crackers. That's a hard one to beat. And so you see the table that we have here. This is where we have most of our meals, and it's also expandable. We could unfold the bottom half and it would be twice as long. When we have our cosmonaut colleagues come down, we generally open up the table, and we have a nice big family style table to have our dinners or lunches at. But this is where we have most of our meals, and yeah, we're going to show you what snack time is like.
While Victor's getting into his snacks right now, there's a couple utensils that are very important on board station. One of those is a pair of scissors. You always got to have your scissors ready for when you need to eat, when it's snack time or meal time, because some of these bags are hard to get into without the scissors. Then the other thing that's very important, though, in this case, Victor's not going to need it, but in general, the thing that's also very important for us is our spoon. You notice we have a very long spoon, but that allows us to get, when we have some of these other food bags that we have, they're a little bit longer, and so that lets us get all the way down into the food bags. But that is a critical piece of equipment on board the International Space Station, and if you lose that, it's not a good day when you lose your spoon. But you'll notice, the other advantages of floating. That you don't necessarily have to always get it right the first time. You can catch it up to it. But then the other hand, it does tend to make eating sometimes a little bit messy when you're having soup or something that's got a sauce on it. Oftentimes when you pull it out of the bag with your spoon, you'll have a few drops. And so every day on Saturday, or every Saturday, is cleaning day for us. And this is one of the nodes that can get kind of messy because meal times do tend to get a little bit messy. So you notice Victor's meal or his snack is something that's prepared, right? So my snack, though, it takes a little bit more work. I'm going to also have to cut open my bag for my wheat crackers. And I will do that right now. Again, scissors are always handy. One of the other things that we tend to do is we never cut all the way through, because then it's a little piece of trash that can easily get lost up here. And so now I've got my cracker, and I'm going to need my spoon. And so I get a little bit of peanut butter. Well, maybe a lot of peanut butter.
I want some peanut butter now too.
I'm going to put it on there. The other thing you notice, there's a lot of Velcro on station, and so here, I've got Velcro on my spoon, and that allows me to set it down, because otherwise it's just going to float away. We don't have the benefits of gravity up here where you can just set something on the table and it's going to stay right there. On the other hand, I can let go of my cracker and it's going to stay in the general location. And so now I'm tearing open my jelly packet, and this is, as Ike said earlier, this is grape jelly. Big fan of grape jelly. And voila, I now have a cracker, a peanut butter and jelly cracker.
Bon appetit, or as we say in Russian, priятного аппетита.
Okay, we're now in Node 3, and Node 3 is one of these special modules as well, because there's a lot of different activities that happen here in Node 3. First of all, it's our exercise room for a couple of our pieces of equipment that we have. So we're going to look over here, and you can see our treadmill. And so this is called T2. And the treadmill, what we actually do is we put on a kind of like a backpacking harness, and we connect ourselves to these bungees. And with these bungees, they then hold us down on the treadmill, and then once it actually starts moving, it's not a bad cardio workout, but it also, the impacts as well as you're running are important for us, because they help keep our bones healthy, and so it's not just for cardio. Moving on into Node 3 here, another very important piece of equipment on board. And this is our toilet. And so a couple things about our toilet. You can see there is a can here, and this can, that's where the solid waste is collected, and then the urine is collected in this hose. And so because we collect the urine separately, we're able to recycle that urine. And there is a lot of equipment that it takes to recycle the urine, turn it into drinking water, and a lot of that is hidden behind these racks that are here in Node 3 as well. Now, continuing our tour of Node 3, this is also, as I mentioned, we have several exercise pieces of equipment in here. And this is our ARED, which is our weightlifting device. And so we are able to lift weights. You can see It's got an exercise bar, very much like the exercise bars that you would find in your standard gym, but on the ends we don't have the spot where you would put weights, because of course the weights wouldn't work up here. What we do have instead are these cylinders that we take to a vacuum. The cylinders up here, we can take them to a vacuum, and then through a series of pulleys and lever arms we're able to generate weight loads that go anywhere from, you can see, down at about 10 pounds all the way up to 600 pounds. And so we have quite a bit of capability here to exercise. Behind this wall, where you can see actually quite a bit of storage, there's actually another hatch, and on that hatch is connected a NanoRacks airlock, and so we have another capability of taking payloads and putting them outside of the station. Of course, if we have to do that, we actually have to move all of this equipment first, and then we can access the hatch and that airlock. Now, one of the other really special places here on board the International Space Station, and this is the cupola. And the cupola is the window that faces down at the Earth, and so it's when you have a few moments, it's always a special place to come and look out. But we also use it as well for Earth observations. We also use it when we're capturing a vehicle, a supply vehicle that comes up, such as a Cygnus, and so we can reach out with a robotic arm, and we have a robotic workstation here that allows us to do that. So I'm going to give you a quick look outside and give you a sense of what our views are like. And it is a pretty incredible view, and it really never does get old. The Earth is an amazing place, and so I'll also give you a sense, you know, not only do you get to see the Earth, but you also have pretty good views of the rest of station, the outside of station. And so as you're looking back, you can see the, what we call that Russian segment, and there is the Soyuz, where our two crewmates, our two cosmonaut crewmates, Sergei 1 and Sergei 2, they came up in that, as well as Kate Rubins. Behind that is the Progress, which is a supply vehicle. Right next to us is Cygnus, which is one of our supply vehicles. And as you continue looking, that is the U.S. lab connected to Node 2, which is where those crew quarters are located. And if you look off the front of station there, that's where the SpaceX Crew Dragon Resilience is located. And then the JIM, the Japanese module, with its exposed facility. And then on the other side is the Columbus module. And so that kind of gives you a good sense of the layout of station. And then the other piece that I'll show you is when you look out along the trusses, and you can see those solar arrays, those giant solar arrays that generate the power for us, as well as radiators that help us with the cooling. And so we have those solar arrays on either side of the station. On this side it's a little harder to see because that Cygnus vehicle is in the way, but you can kind of see one of the solar arrays back there. And again, this is a nice view of the outside of station. I just have a couple more modules to show you real quick. One of them is what we call the PMM, which is basically our storage closet. And so when you take a look inside here, you're going to see that there's not a lot of room in here because storage is at a premium. And so this is inside the PMM. Again, it's just a big storage closet for us, and we keep it pretty full all the time. Okay, that concludes our tour of the International Space Station. Hopefully you enjoyed it, you learned something, you learned how to float. So the next time you're in space, you'll be able to adapt that much quicker. But it was a real pleasure for Ike and I to be able to give you this tour. And again, we hope to see you real soon back on Earth. Bye, everyone.